Good evening all. My name is Amudan. I am part of Marupakkam. Uh, we are doing this online film festival in association with C S Venkiteswaran. And this whole online program we started in the month of April after the lockdown was started. And we have been showing films every weekend, and we have been having discussions with the filmmakers. We had one or two festivals in between, and this is our third film festival. And we have Venkati and I have done this artist film cinema program thrice, I think. This is our fourth program together. And as we all know, we are showing works of 9 artists and almost 19 films. And so far, the response has been very good. We have received more than 1,800 visits to our blog. Every film received more than 100 views. So it's been very nice. We had a discussion yesterday also. This is our interaction as part of the interaction series. This is our interaction 2. So now I invite Venkati to take charge and start the program. Venkati.
Thank you, Amudan. First of all, let me thank all the filmmakers and Amudan for this opportunity. Wonderful films from 9 filmmakers. We have been, as Amudan said, we have been doing it for some years now, and it is gathering momentum in the sense that more artists are joining, and I think the viewership is also expanding in a sense. A lot of we took it to a lot of festivals, international film festivals like Mumbai International Film Festival. We had it in International Documentary and Short Film Festival of Kerala, and we went to with Marupakkam. We had a screening. We had screenings in Chennai. So it's actually finding a lot of interest among filmmakers, among artists, and this is also actually meant as a kind of interface where artists present their work before a film audience. Basically, the kind of work that is most often shown, produced by artists, are shown in galleries, museums, maybe biennales and all that. And also works like that of Ashish, Avinkunthak, many video works of Vipin, and many of the artists in this package are mostly shown in very select audience in niche spaces like galleries or very exclusive kind of spaces. And I think this artist cinema is also an attempt to bring these body of work happening elsewhere, happening in association with other kinds of, most of the people are doing other kinds of working in other media also. So I think the attempt is to bring these works to a film audience. That is what we have been trying to do. And it has elicited a lot of very interesting response because the way in which these artists have been working with this moving image or even still image, like as Gigi was saying yesterday, all the Gigi's works yesterday, there is not a single moving image. It's all animated still images. Okay. So I think the kind of freedom with which these artists have used the moving image forms and formats to to create a work of art is very interesting, which I think often filmmakers find it difficult to actually explore. They are most often caught up with certain kinds of formats, certain kinds of durations, and certain kinds of the horizons of expectations, aesthetic ideas they work with is, I find, sometimes is very limiting their work of art, like their expressions, because you limit yourself to certain kinds of formats, to certain durations, to a certain kind of audience, certain kinds of film festival taste that film festivals and curators create. So I think these set of films made by artists in different contexts, for maybe part of many of these works are part of video installations. There were multiple, multi-screen installations, which we have brought a single screen format here. So I think this is a different kind of visual experience that this set of films provide. And even if you look at the 19 films of 9 filmmakers we have presented here, they show a wide range of thematic, in terms of thematics, in terms of narrative styles, in terms of the way in which they're using different kinds of materials, like not just visuals, but also archival materials, found footages, still images, sound, all kinds of things. I think that is very, very fascinating, and it's a kind of stimulating the imagination of filmmakers and film audience in a totally different way. That is what we are trying to explore through this Artisanal package. And it's open till midnight of November 1st. And a lot of people are watching. We had a very positive response from many people, especially filmmakers. A lot of them called and said they really liked the selection of works and all that. So now this is the second of the interactive sessions that we are having. Yesterday we had Gigi Skaria, Pavadi Nair, and Ranjini Krishnan talking about their works and also answering questions and responding to comments about their work. Today we have 3 other filmmakers. We have Ashish Avinkunthak, we have Vipin Vijay, and also Riyas Komu will be joining us soon. So we have 3 filmmakers whose films are featured in this package. We have 2 films of Vipin, Small Scale Societies and Video Game. Ashish Avinkunthak, we have Performing Death. Riyas Komu's 2 works, Last Wall and My Grave. I think most of these participants who are watching it are also here present. They have seen these films. The format is very informal. I think we'll have an hour's time to exchange our ideas and impressions about these films. And the format is like this. We will give these filmmakers 5 to 10 minutes, 5 to 6, 7 minutes to talk about their works. And then after each of them talking about their works, we'll open the session for questions and comments to the participants. So I think I'll start with Ashish. So Ashish, please.
Thank you, Venkati, for inviting me. I really appreciate this invitation. Thank you, everybody, for being present here. I am in America right now. It's like 8:30 in the morning, and it was snowing yesterday night, and there was a power outage. It actually just came back about a couple of hours ago. So I was worried if I would be able to be in this event. So I'm really thankful that the electricity came and I can talk to you. Performing Death was made nearly 20 years ago. At that time, I was in America. I had just arrived. And can you hear me?
Yeah, you're audible. Yeah, please go ahead.
So I came, this was made, as I said, 20 years ago, and it's a very simple film. It was, first of all, let me tell you why I made it. There was a conference in Thessaloniki in Greece where I was invited, and rather than presenting a paper, I thought I would make this video. And this video basically is about materiality and ontology of death. This was a session on the materiality of death. In the sense, this was a session in a conference on archaeology, which is what, I don't know, some of you might know, I'm trained as an archaeologist. And the idea was to see if one can deal cinematically through a certain idea of materiality. And at that time, I was working on an article which has been published about 15 years ago, on Park Street Cemetery in Calcutta. Now, for those who have visited Calcutta, you might have heard about it, but a lot of people who live in Calcutta also don't know that In the heart of the city is this colonial cemetery, which is very, very historically interesting and important, not just for Calcutta or India, but for the rest of the world, because this is the first non-church cemetery in the world, with the first burial starting in 1767. Now, this Park Street Cemetery started as a response to pandemic, almost like not a pandemic, an epidemic, which was an annual epidemic in Calcutta during the monsoon months, where close to about 20 to 30% of the Europeans would die because of tropical diseases at that time unknown, like malaria or cholera. And the amount of people who would die during the monsoon months would be so much that the local church, which was at that time in what is now called Dalhousie Square in Calcutta, there were a couple of churches, and they were all denominational churches, that only those who are part of a particular denomination would be buried in those churches. Those churches would get very soon clogged with dead bodies. And the fear of dead bodies producing diseases, this particular relationship between dead body and disease was emerging in very early medical scientific records, scholarship of that time, that the British colonial figures in Calcutta decided that the dead bodies have to be taken far away from the city. And that's when the cemetery began. So I was at that time working on a scholarly paper on this particular cemetery, and I had shot footages there. So I used that, and the second section of the film deals with the quintessential festival in Calcutta, which is also a celebration, which is also not a celebration, it also deals with death in the sense that the killing of Mahishashur by Durga leads to a celebration. And that's what I decided to do in the film, is to kind of have a conversation between a colonial past, which is actually dead, which is about the dying, and have it in conversation with the living, which is the Durga Puja. And yeah, that was the whole idea, was to play around with these two forms of a certain sense of ontological being. One is dead, the other is non-dead in Calcutta. That's how this film began. It was a very quick film, which is something that I don't do anymore. I kind of made this in over a matter of couple of weeks. In the sense that we shot it in Calcutta for 2 days. And the footage of Durga Puja that you see in the film was shot by a very dear friend of mine who many of you would know, Ranjan Palit. So we used that footage and then made this film. As I was telling Venkati earlier, I don't make small films anymore. Most of my works are large, long films running into more than an hour or 2 hours long. So when Venkati asked me to share my work, I said, this is one of the few films I have. So I'm really grateful to Venkati for showing it, and looking forward to your responses. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk.
Thank you, Ashish. I think we'll go to the responses later. So I'll move to Vipin to talk about his films and what he looks like. Vipin. Please unmute yourself.
Okay.
Fine,
Oh,
fine. Yeah.
okay, fine. Thank you, Ashish. It's in fact hearing Ashish after a long time, actually. And mostly we were talking over the phone, actually. Now I can see you. Um, well, there are two works. The second work probably Ashish would have interest because it's to do with archaeological imagination as such. Uh, uh, I had sent Dr. C S Venkiteswaran today a note, which I thought so that I talk less and answer more questions. The first work, video game, the title itself is indicative of both in terms of um, the areas the film actually dwells. People who have seen it can understand. This was actually after 2-3 years of passing out from the Film Institute, actually. So I'd actually applied for a project with PSBT, which was commissioned under the commissioning brief called Environment. So, but somehow it had to suit. I mean, the initial idea was to look at a man-machine kind of a the relationship and look at the creases of subjectivity associated with it. But incidentally, I'd been to again Calcutta, and then I found out that I was it was the last few batch. I mean, it was at the time when the we were still editing on Steenbeck, so you had to have a 35 positive to edit, and then you go for a marriage print later on in the lab. So the film was shot. I shot this diploma film, which is titled "The Egotic World," which is a 35 black and white film. So I accidentally, I was standing before the editing department, talking to the then students studying there, and then I saw these cans, discarded positives being taken because they'll be sold as scrap, and people say they are recycled and made into bangles actually, and stuff like that, or whatever. So I had some curiosity, and then I found out that they were supposed to take my discarded cans actually. So then I requested that, can I get those, can I actually get those materials? So there's no way that I can scan it there. So actually I shot it over on the Steenbeck using a very low-end video camera actually. But that's it. And then when this project with PSBT was commissioned, I actually decided to revisit the same space where I had actually shot the diploma film. That was a very strange experience because I was shooting in a place called Pakbira near in Puncha. It's somewhere near Purulia, and very cut off area. And it was a very strange experience. Some of them which I do not want to mention over here, because there were legal implications as well on that. So I think there was this crew members, young 23-year-old gang, 23, 24, 25 maximum. And we went out to shoot, and then it actually had a very, very interesting as well as complex sort of experience. So I think that experiential phase was very important for all of us. I was actually trying to look into a sort of an interpretation into the text of Yoga Vasishtam actually, which is a seminal text. And so I think the post the shooting, of course, the film went to Oberhausen and other things, but there were footages which were not used. And now what I did is that once I came back to Kerala, I had very little work to do because I think the digital domain hadn't come, and we were using video, low-end video. So I mean, that was the only possibility. So I went back to the same space, traveling in a black Mark IV Ambassador car. And the film takes several detours actually. And by the time I reached the place, I mean, there was no enigma as such associated with it. Actually, it didn't. I mean, it didn't actually resonate the way we had this earlier experience. So what had happened is that so we were dejected. So we did not know what to do. But I think the U-turn happened when we started editing, actually. Of course, at that time, we had read some seminal text of Frederick Jameson, the Marxist political theorist, who talked about the phenomenology of memory in context of video. So we at least, some of us knew the medium from those particular contexts, actually. So we were very clear about working on film and working on the turf of video is going to be very different in terms of engagement. So anyway, I mean, we were trying to make a very conscious engagement, but I think what had happened is that as we started looking into the materials, we found very other kind of areas propping out, actually. Now, this was very interesting because we were it is a kind of a sort of a new preserved substance, almost the idea of memory being layered, and so I think we wanted to go beyond the informational layer of the film and actually push and pull ourselves within the provoking the intellect and mostly the reasoning capacity. Now, this actually brought in an area where we were starting to deal with actual concepts. Can we have a conceptual thinking? This sort of thought actually, this film actually helped us to look at it seriously. Some of us who were working, most of them were my batchmates, actually. So I think I think this whole idea of human subjectivity and memory, subjectivity of the machine, especially the post-human pragmatic thoughts, the medium of video. Again, there's an archaeologist, amateur archaeologist. So this whole idea of archaeological imagination all started kind of emanating from this process, and there's a kind of a strange sense of confidence was building within us to do this, push and pull, and the malleability factor of the whole turf of video was very playful, actually. So I think this whole idea of what could be concept image, we friends were also influenced that time reading Deluge. You have the idea of movement image, then you have time image. Now, what do you do? I mean, when you're working with concepts. So I think these we could really, I do not know whether this was articulated earlier, but they were concept images in some sense. And maybe if there are some questions, then I will try to look at it in terms of I mean, how an inanimate, or say unlike non-human, can have creases. What is the subjectivity related to a non-human? In those terms, in terms of man-machine encounter and stuff like that. So I'll take up those questions, actually. But I think this is a very, very important work with regard to my career, actually. And the second work is titled Small Scale Societies. I think Dr. C S Venkiteswaran, I'd actually, at one point of time after making my last feature film, I'd actually thought of doing, I mean, maybe taking a break or not wanting. There was, what would you do, when there is no sort of, you're not excited, there is no, you don't become yourself an exciting machine anymore. So why do you make films? Why do you want to make films? This is exactly a time when I started teaching, actually. So I was heading a department, so Dr. C S Venkiteswaran had come there. So so in the earlier feature film work, there was this space that I had worked. Am I audible? There's some
Yes.
okay. in the earlier feature film that before I joined the film school as a faculty that I did, I'd actually shot something. Okay, then let me tell you something. So I told CS that, you know, I'd been working in this. I had shot this film in a place called Jwalapuram in Kurnool district in Andhra Pradesh. That is a place the archaeologists claim to have hominid habitation even before and after the Toba event. You know, the Toba catastrophic event, which happened 75,000 years ago. Toba is a place in Sumatra in Indonesia, and you can find these ash beds there. Actually, now they take those volcanic ash and as part of making detergent and others. So there's a lot of people working in that side, but not archaeologists as such. So I had almost all of my works have actually had this as a spatial choice. I'd worked in archaeological sites, whether it's in Hampi or Pagbira or Jwalapuram, Sangankal in Karnataka and stuff like that. So, and definitely I also personally think that archaeology and cinematographic writing, you know, have something in common actually in terms of the encounter, in terms of the document, the idea of document, you know, documenting actually. So it is at that time that Dr. C S Venkiteswaran was part of a curatorial team, and Riyas Komu, I don't know if Riyas is around. Has Riyas come, joined us? No.
No.
Riyas,
Yeah, he's there. He's there.
Hi, Riyas. Riyas was. I met Riyas, you know, once and had shown my earlier first feature film, and then maybe I think Riyas didn't like it. So I don't know. We never, we hardly met afterwards. So, but I think I was telling Riyas the other day, you know, then CS told me to meet Riyas, and then I went with a brief, and Riyas was actually curating a very important program, and maybe Riyas can also talk about it actually, if there is time actually, called the Young Subcontinent. So they had actually been traveling around in the subcontinent, inviting artists to exhibit and work and exhibit their works in Goa at this venue in Goa for the Serendipity Arts Festival. So basically, Small Scale Society was funded, and it was part of Riyas's initiative for the Young Subcontinent program actually. And so I think, so I do not know, it was a pull actually. So I just again got back into what, after a brief sabbatical, into trying to make film. But then this time it was very different because it was not meant to be made for a film festival. It didn't have any sort of a beginning, middle, and end. It probably was not going to be broadcast. So the festival would take a location, usually that's what they do, where the Young Subcontinent programs were held. This time they took the old Goa Management Institute, which is a colonial building. And so they would give me a room. So I selected one room. So the video would be looped from 10 to 5 or 6 actually. So basically even the titles won't be there actually. I'd put the titles later because I thought there should be some sort of an image index added to it, and the credits have to be given. So now coming back to the thing, so this was a very freewheeling exercise. Now I had very specific questions formulated, 3 or 4 of them, which I have actually briefed in my note that I've given. So archaeology is a discipline, you know, in terms of beyond the boundaries of humanities and science, can there be another kind of an engagement by a cinematographer, almost like etching, writing, a new kind of cartographic design that can be made, and a possible imagination kind of coming through that process. So I think we have shot in a couple of places. We have shot in Chhattisgarh, Jwalapuram, Sangankal, which is supposed to be the first village in the Neolithic period in South India, Pattanam excavation. So also then we worked with two artists actually. So within a space in Pattanam. So, so I think significantly it is a very important marker again, because one was also seeing what could be the response. And I think I've had a very totally different kind of experience of people walk, and the idea of wanting to present their work in a museum space is totally different in this context actually. So two divergent, two works done at different point of time in my career. Um, uh, this is a brief introduction that I would really like to do, and then pick up questions if there are any. Is that okay, CS?
Yeah, it's okay. Thank you, Vipin, for this very detailed response. I think now we will move to Riyas. Riyas, are you there? You're there? Hello? Yeah.
Yes.
Please, yeah.
Yeah, I'm there. Yeah, sorry, I couldn't join earlier because I was, the last moment my studio internet connection got cut off, so I had to rush home. So sorry about that. So it's great to, first of all, big thank you to Amudan and CS for, inviting me to be part of this art cinema curated project. And it's also good that, many of our friends, part of this from the art world and the world of cinema. And it's also great to see Ashish Chadha after many years. We have, very interesting, stories, early 2000 in Bombay. So especially at the time of the, the strikes which happened in Pune Film Institute. So just to get into my work, because I'm not a filmmaker per se. So I actually came to Bombay in 1990 to study art, visual art, and I'm a student of painting. But the interesting thing about learning in JJ was that JJ was an institution unlike many other art institutions in the country. It's located in a city like Bombay. So Bombay being like the mecca also of like filmmaking, and so the cinema was always around, and a lot of interesting film festivals, and so it always attracted as a medium. But at the same time, as a campus, the JJ was very much involved in life studies, figure drawing, portrait painting. So JJ had a very interesting lineage towards looking at human body, as a process of learning art. Which I think most of the other institutions doesn't have. But maybe post 1992, there was a general revolt against abstraction. So it also came into the JJ campus, and in fact, people wanted to narrate stories, their sufferings. So that was a time like I joined. So I also had that tendency, which was also growing around to kind of, because see, everybody is taught a kind of an academic behavior. At the same time, when it comes to creative painting, everybody will do an abstract. So that was the the policy and process in the campus, and most of the teachers are following abstract school. That's JJ's history. But towards 95, 96 and all, there was an entry of like conceptual art very strongly through the students' works. There are a lot of examples of today's contemporary art world. And yeah, I also started, so from the beginning, I would say that, I used to take a lot of photographs. So that was one of my initial engagements with image making. So I used to move around. And in fact, that was also the time, like, photography was used as a reference by many students. They used to do Xerox transfers. So there's the photography, the image, the story figure became kind of a, a very important context in the work. So abstraction was moving away, or, figures were kind of the basic skeleton for making an abstraction. So it's a very interesting process. At the time is very aesthetic, and, so it's, so that's the time, I also, got into it. So I made a first film. I mean, I can't say the films. I used to shoot a lot of transparencies. So the first work was like, about a boy who, used to work in a vegetable market next to my hostel. He's from Tamil Nadu, a very, very young boy called Ramaru. He was 8 years old. So I started using him as a protagonist, and I took him around to, places like Berambada, Dharavi, the Mahim regions and King Circle. So I made a lot of documentaries to narrate a story about, like, how this child is encountering an urban settlement, as so he was dressed very differently and he's moving around. So that was manually done. 280 transparencies used by a Corazole was used, and edited my sound with tape recorder, like using two rep recorders, like, I created the sound. So it was also exhibited, as an experiment work in the college, and also in a few galleries. So this is also the time that I started, using, video, media images in my work. Then, photography also, like, became, one of the important reference points, which I normally shoot. And I was not obsessed with video art, which never, attracted, my interest. But I was interested in, like, telling few interesting stories which I saw around. So one of the story was like Mahim Dargah. Outside Mahim Dargah, you see, a lot of people sit outside, doing nothing just to eat. So it became, so I started, like, studying it, and like every day, I pass through that road sometimes in my bus to going to college from Bandra to VT. So I started seeing, like, these people are there. They're very static, and they enter, people throw money. So I wanted to kind of know what is the process, which is going on. People are made to sit, and there are hundreds of them sitting. So I started working on it. So these are people, like, stationed there. So you throw money, the hotel gives, like, mutton surba and, like, roti. So they keep eating. So they are actually kind of eating machines to run a kind of a charity machine. So, this kind of a larger, process. So I documented that, juxtaposed with, some of the images of my early days in Kerala. So a work called Politics of Nostalgia and Food. So in fact, when I was seeing, whenever I saw, like, the I saw a moment in Vipin's film, which actually resonates with this idea of, like, creating certain kind of systemic intervention to kind of, to have a kind of process going. So I remember that, the auto rickshaw driver says that, ആൾക്ക് കള്ളുഷാപ്പിൽ കള്ളൊക്കെ ഫ്രീ ആണ്, like, he gets, free, toddy in the toddy shop, because he's becoming part of a kind of a system to kind of, to move on. So I kind of connected with that particular film. So and in between, there was again a film that, because I was very much shocked by what happened in Sri Lanka, the genocide. So I wanted to respond to that. So I made a film called Agam Puram, which was also shown in many exhibitions, even abroad. And so yeah, it was previewed in Chennai, in one of the art festivals. So that's, like, good. Looking through kind of Kannagi, person, myth and perspective. So I had a single shot for 13 minutes of Kannagi. We shot from early, 5:30 in the morning to evening around, 7:30. So that's a film, where I also worked with Gargi Trivedi, the photographer. So that work, like, juxtaposed with the genocide and, the Kannagi, still, which is like on a time lapse. So, maybe that's one work, I would say, which was slightly closer to, video art making. So, but the good thing was that, the making that cinema was also to kind of visit sites. Because we spent a lot of, I remember traveling with Amrit Lal and the entire crew to Chennai, Madurai, Pumbuhar, and it was a very interesting time. That kind of. So for me also, it was a kind of visiting certain sites of historic importance. The port city, Pumbuhar being one of the ancient, the trade junctions of early time. So yeah, then coming to My Grave, which is part of My Grave and The Last Wall, which is part of this particular festival. it's again, for example, My Grave was a project which I was able to do, have very fortunate to have Nasruddin Shah, as an actor in that. It's a single short film, as some of you must have seen it. And it was part of a, project to fundraise for this Kushi charitable trust to support the children. So I discussed them, and we were supposed to paint together and create a work and sell it and generate money. So I had a very interesting conversation with Nasir Saab, and I told him that I have something like this too, because I want to respond to the time, and you being like one of the greatest face we have in the Indian cinema. So I want you to enact the time, like, I mean, we are going through, like, I mean, the crisis, chaos, violence, religious conflicts. So I want you to, I mean, I just gave him one-page script and he read it, and, we did 5 single shots. I think Avijit Mukul Kishore was the cameraman. So we shot it in a studio in Andheri. So it's just a, I mean, I would say it's a kind of purely a kind of a reflection of the time that which you are able to read through a man, a legend like, you know, Nasruddin Shah. So I think it's a very simple work according to me. The good thing is that it's single shot, uh, which, I mean, a format which I had never, experimented in such a way. So the last wall is my own surrounding, my own studio surrounding. There was a man who was like mentally unstable. You know, he used to just move around and scribble this graffiti on the wall with this chuna. That, I mean, in Bombay we all see that. I mean, the tambaku, they use this small white tuna tube, and that's his tool. I mean, that's his medium to make this graffiti. So it's like, I mean, almost 2 to 3 kilometers around IC Colony and the IC Extension and the Borivali, that Link Road area. So he just gets up in the morning, sometimes in the middle of the night. You see, like, I mean, this man is active. I mean, he's scribbling and he writes very rarely. I've seen only, like, maybe, like, I mean, the total I've seen only 1 or 2 graffitis which is written in Hindi, and the Hindi is like, I mean, he will write uh, paisa, I mean, and roti, and a few very crucial text which is translated in, but everything else in English, very abstract, very absurd. Some of them you can read, and it's also contextual. If he's writing it on a wall of a bank, you will see something related with, like, I mean, accounting. So if he's writing it on a building, like, I mean, it has got its own resonating spirit to kind of the inhabitants of that place. So I found it very interesting. So, and he also used to write on the counters of tea shops, and everything. Like, people used to take care of him. Like, I mean, some people used to believe him that he's a Baba. So when I was shooting that, I mean, some people, like, I could see that, I mean, they have huge respect also towards it. So, and yeah, I mean, he was followed, for a particular period of time. Then we decided to shoot. I mean, again, Gargi, did the cinematographic work for that, and and it was a very interesting process to follow somebody who's like, you know, very unsettled. And I wouldn't call him like mad, because I was not approaching him like that. But it was also the time I was interested in the ideas of discarded, excluded. So it's almost like a diary. I mean, it's a kind of a personal experience, because it all was happening around between my sculpture studio and painting studio, and also the surroundings I lived with. In fact, one good thing which I enjoyed making that film was my, collaboration with Gunjan Shah. Is a very interesting sound, engineer. I mean, he's also, I mean, in fact, the one work which you're also seeing of Sumed Rajendran, I think the sound is done by him. So he's somebody who's like, I mean, very promising. He's done the last film is Meera Nair's film. So it's, I was, in fact, I mean, he was much more, approachable that time, and we still are discussing some projects to, use the sound. And Ujjal Chandra, again, from FTI. He did the editing, and he did the editing in my studio. So it was a very interesting, like, I mean, way of, making in the whole thing. So cinema was there. I mean, so I think, I've been very fortunate to work along with CS to as we developed the project Artist Cinema. So CS was one of the early consultants when, as part of the biennial, me being a director of programs, because we wanted to make the biennial a multidisciplinary project. I mean, it was not just about contemporary, arts per se. So it had cinema, it had literature, it had performance, it had, all aspects coming together. So Artist Cinema was a project again, if I tell my, relationship with, cinema as a medium. So, we were able to kind of launch it. I mean, in fact, 100-day-long film festival was done as part of the duration of the biennial. Every evening we showed films. So the relationship, I would say that, through from the beginning, till today, I kind of maintained a very strong relationship, cinema being one of the, most, kind of I mean, that's a space that a lot of osmosis of different streams happen. So that's something which I liked. And another area of my interest was football cinema. So I think that's maybe as a last point I would just like to add. I mean, I was fortunate to kind of work with Faisal Khan, who's a football writer. So we launched the first International Football Film Festival in Goa, and also took it to Trivandrum with the support of Simon Cooper, one of the most important. He writes for Financial Times on sports, but mainly football. He has got two major books called Football Against Enemy and Soccernomics. So he's somebody who works very closely with football as a social, project, and also was fortunate to work with Jan Tillman, the football film historian. I mean, he's compiled a book with 500 football cinemas, which was produced in the world. In 2012, he launched the book. So it's in Germany. It's in German. But he came down to Goa, and then we did a 1-month-long trip in India, visiting some of the crucial sites of cinema and festivals. And we ended up our trip in Trivandrum Film Festival. So it's the relationship with cinema has, traveled across in that sense. So yeah, I think that's something which I want to give it as an introduction. So I think that was enough. Thanks, CS.
Thank you, Riyas. I think we have come to the end of this presentation of the artist. Now it's open for questions and comments. Abdul, how do you go about it?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can.
I think we can. We have. I think a lot of. We have 25 people. I don't know when you can call everybody, but maybe we can start inviting people. Then slowly people can join.
Yeah.
So can we invite Mr. Killy to start again?
Sure. Killy, please.
Good evening. Thank you once again for inviting me, Mr. Amudan. Thanks for all the introductions that have been provided by all the filmmakers. Thanks also for screening the movie in this series. Well, to start with Mr. Ashish Avinkunthak's film, Performance of Death. You started saying it's an experiment on the ontology and the materiality of death. I don't know whether I can stop by just being on the ontology and materiality. You said there's a conversation between the colonial past and the present. I find the conversation itself is dead. By actually taking first half of the film of the colonial past, and by bringing in the lively character of the Durga Puja into the second half, though there is a commonality of death that is being displayed, but the death in the second half is something to do with the tradition, belief, and mythology. The first half is to do with the human death, and I see there is a connectivity between these two. I see it as a cultural encounter where the colonial past has been beaten by the Hindu cultural tradition. how to perceive it. I look at it a very, I'm looking for answers from that film. Are you trying to say that the colonial past is dead because of the cultural liveliness of the tradition that is being alive in the Hindu society? How do you kind of look at it from not from an ontological point of view, from a political point of view? That's one question I wanted to know. With Vipin Vijay's films, I find you're more into the archaeological acceptance of things. The first film, the video game, I had many assumptions before going into the film, looking at the title, but after viewing the film, I had a very different experience. The certain shots were absolutely fantastic, where I find a Muslim man going for namaz, and then the car moves, you show a Mahavira statue standing there, and then then the spiritual dance come in with an oration. So I think the depiction of the film was fantastic. The memories that you have brought in, the remnants of archaeology and the memories of the human beings and their connectivity to the non-human features are really appearing in a very fantastic manner. It's very even in today's world, I think you can find the people are very attached to the non-human. A car is one thing where people are very attached. A bike is one thing where people are very attached, which is completely non-human. But you also bring in the spirituality and the sexuality as a subjectivity into this non-humanness, which is very fantastic. That I enjoyed the movie absolutely really well. From the second film is completely. I was quite impressed because as a history student, I loved that film, having a look of certain archaeological sites, and that and you have created a different imaginative aspect into it. I loved that film for that. The other one, Mr. Riyas Komu's film, I would like to ask Mr. Riyas Komu whether he was able to decipher the wall, which was inscribed by that man. The aesthetics of the film was fantastic. In fact, the wall was actually alive with the presence of that man. So I loved predominantly it didn't actually look into the economic or the other aspect of that particular individual, but it actually looked into the aesthetics of the life of that human in relation to that wall. That's how I saw that. That's how I perceived that film, and it was a very fantastic picturization of that film. The second film was I also sat like Mr. Nazruddin Shah in front of the screen, looking at him and staring at him. That had a very different emotional experience. So those are the comments I would like to provide. In case of any questions further, I would definitely come in back. Thank you so much.
I think you can have a quick response on the artist, Ashish.
Thank you for your response. I'm not making, for me, the film deals with a certain idea of being in Calcutta, in the sense that here you have the largest city in the world in 19th century, in 18th and 19th century, completely getting lost in the 20th century. And all that remained was a small patch of land where the deads were buried. Now, the history of Park Street Cemetery is very interesting, and that plays a very important role in understanding the film, is that the cemetery has been since 1950 slowly being demolished. And today, if you go to Calcutta, that cemetery is just one 1/7 of what it actually existed. And for me, that became when I started visiting the cemetery, and I started doing it when I was in school because it's just adjacent to where I studied. I got very enamored by the possibility of this colonial dead that existed between in the center of the city. So the film, to a great extent, is a requiem for the dead, which is now dead. And then why I show the Durga Puja more as a sense of another celebration of death. Now, I will leave it to your interpretation for you to decide if you think that the Hindu culture has demolished the colonial past or not. That is not very important to me. For me, what was important that in the city of Calcutta, both are existing, that they are both in a certain sense in conversation with each other. Now, if that conversation is about defeat or about loss, about victory, I have a very different opinion about that. And but in this film, that is not what I'm trying to do. I'm not creating a dichotomy between victory and defeat. I am suggesting the possibility of coterminity, that the possibility that two forms of being are existing simultaneously. And that is something that is very important in the context that we are in right now, especially in the context of archaeology and the debates of archaeology. 2019 marks a very important moment in the history of archaeology in India when the Supreme Court of India decides to uphold a spurious archaeological excavation conducted by Archaeological Survey of India in 2003 in Ayodhya. So here you have an excavation that was very problematically conducted in 2003, which was then upheld as scientific by the High Court, and then 10 years later in 2019 by the Supreme Court. So and in that particular archaeological investigation, a certain destruction is justified scientifically. For me, that becomes an intense problem. And what I'm trying to do in this film is trying to suggest that in Calcutta, because there was, since, as I said, 1/7 of only 1/7 of the cemetery exists, the rest has been destroyed after 1947. And that was done by by the Congress party when the first Congress regime was in Calcutta, the West Bengal. So for me, the destruction of materiality, the destruction of archaeological materiality is the central concern about that film. And to argue that there's a possibility of coterminity, that two fundamentally different ideas of being can exist together in what we understand as Indian civilization. I would argue that within the context of Indian civilization, if you create narratives of defeat, narratives of victory, then it is a loss to the idea of Indian civilization. And I think for me, this film is just a very small element in arguing for a possibility of, and this I'll go back to ontology, of a possibility of an ontological continuity between different kinds of materiality that exist simultaneously. I don't know if this helps you in understanding what I'm trying to do, but thank you for your response.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ashish. I welcome that comment because even I'm not with the victory or defeat. I too stand by your views of coexistence, which is what the long history stands for. Thank you so much for that comment. Thank you for the clarification.
Thank you. I think Vipin has disappeared. Like Riyas, would you like to respond? You're unmute. You're unmute.
Yeah, Vipin has come. Yeah,
yeah,
Vipin.
yeah. You can finish.
Okay. I think it should be basically some comments. Basically, there is a difference between a film a film viewing process, a dissemination of a video work in a gallery, and of something that you watch on television. On television, that's also the changing screen dynamics that is happening. Maybe because the experience that I've had while projecting the second work in Goa, and later on, Riyas again curated a Sufi festival, so it was also shown there. Other than a different crowd, actually, in a sense that it is not a sophisticated museum space. So there was large gathering, seeing these videos, people coming in and out, and stuff like that. So the whole experience of moving image is such that this can happen even outside the screen, or or in the area of the mind's eye of the spectator. When you say I like certain shots in a film, now this automatically, if somebody says that I like that scooter, like you were mentioning, or I like the car, I like this, I like the color, I like movement. So this is what is evocative to a viewer for the narrative element in a shot is quite debatable. In a sense, is it composition, color, movement, space, action? What is it actually? Hello, are you hearing? Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but they do provide, do they actually provide a certain cognitive cues, for you to assimilate? Or whether these images are actually staying outside the system of your thought, So I think one of the most interesting aspects of the moving images is that, there's an aspect of the physical movement that gets manifested in visuals to oral and hidden kind of movement, So when you're trying to do these kind of works, it's also an inquiry into a certain mind, which are very complex thoughts about certain entities, certain kind of areas actually. So what I'm saying is that some of my works are, it's kind of, it's not about the known dissected. For example, when I've shown my works here, I think I do not know what are the kind of questions that will come up. Whenever I've shown this kind of work, for example, video game was shown to a known Indian academic. I'm not naming him. He was perplexed by the kind of juxtaposition, for example. How can you have a Frederick Jameson juxtaposed by a B.J. Ballard's work to, crash? Whereas you're playing it around on the turf of video, the layers. Now, for an academic, it's the whole idea is, logic of the known, he works in that parameter. But what about the chaos of the unknown, So I think most of what I try to do, I don't think I've become a master, or I've become enlightened, but I'm saying that I still believe that I do not know is the way you start off. Actually, is that this unfelt and unknown still triggers actually. So what happens is that whenever you get if you see it is a documentation, yes, it is a documentation, but I wouldn't claim it to be a documentation. For me, these are encounters actually. They are both different actually. What do you want to choose is very important here. So so I think those, it's a very, the process to think conceptually is totally different, I can't remember what are the other queries. It was mostly like a comment mostly. So should I elaborate more? Of course, you were trying to talk about were you trying to talk about Kili? Can you make it clear? I mean, I kind of, hello.
Hi. Can
What was the yeah, I was listening to it. One was this idea about, I think you were mentioning the reference to Crash, the work of sexuality with machine, idea of subjectivity with an inanimate, the non-human, So I think this whole idea of post-humanism, or, the post-human pragmatic thought, actually takes this whole idea of man at the center of modern era, that centrality, the idea of that. So what happens is that, so it's very interesting because, even when we were taught in the film school, everything has to be in the center, actually. So I don't think so it is so, actually. I think this post-human idea, the pragmatic thoughts that have come through writings. I mean, there are a lot of people working in that area, like VNS Matrix or a Hito Steril, or contemporary artists like someone like Hito Steril. Now, this is actually this is actually role reverse this man. I mean, it has redefined the relationship between man and the machine, actually. So in some sense, that is true, actually, that a video game actually deals in that terrain. It is an important marker in that sense. Is there anything else that you made as a comment, which I can't? Hello, Kelly?
Yeah, I think that's fine. Yeah. Now, yeah, that the very interesting aspect of your film that I perceive is that the perplexity is what the central focus, but then that perplexity brings in lots of ideas and concepts within it, which are interconnected to each other at the same time, which can be juxtaposed at the same time. There are a lot of complex phenomena that appear within your film. But these are completely related to the human non-human relationships. That's how I saw your film. The central point was that.
Yeah, obviously, there is an immediacy also. The approach is also very immediate. You accept things, you reject things. I feel that I see you cannot have a complete vision of the world. One can only see things in abstraction. So for me, the whole filmmaking process is to look at things from its rootedness and from a certain close proximity. So I think there are contradictions. So what I'm saying is that, this is also a contradiction of an Indian filmmaker per se, actually. Say, for example, when I said about the Indian academic finding issues dealing with a film like video game, it's also a larger I'm also wanting Dr. CS or Riyas to also think that, it's also about a community of people trying to engage with a certain kind of living tradition, actually. And it can be conflicting, it can be contradictory. You are not part of it. You do not know how to dig it. When you dig it, you do not know. You see, it is not about carbon dating or finding the era or the age of, a material or an artifact that interests me, actually. I'm trying to, I mean, as a contemporary man's mind to that of the prehistoric mind, can the gap, can that abyss, I mean, can that gap be bridged? What is that thought? So I think I'm also trying to make an attempt, to actually go and make a dialogue with the unknown at one point, actually. So I think both are different kind of works, but I think I agree to what you say, actually. But if there are some more questions, maybe I think I can take it.
Yes.
Yeah, one is, I mean, I'm happy that, you responded to, Nasir's work in its, maybe with the right spirit, but with the other work, I have not personally tried to kind of decipher or decode, the script. But I was always curious, and I have spent my own readings and tried to understand that. But though the film is only 13 minutes, I think I have many hours of footage of that particular work. And so if anybody is interested in, deciphering or, decoding that particular project, I'm very open to kind of share it with anybody who's interested. Yeah. Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah. Venkateswaran?
Yeah.
Yeah. Can I invite friends? You want me to invite? You want?
Yeah, sure. Please.
Can call. I think. Rita, do you want to have questions, comments? Rita. Sabia Sachi.
Hello.
Yes, Rita, please go ahead.
Yeah, I watched 3 movies. Riyas movie I have already watched before. I loved it.
Hello, am I audible?
Just hold on, Sabia.
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
Riyas's padam I had seen before both the movies. I do not know all the 3 movies which I watched today. I don't know. I'm not able to say whether I like it or not. I think it's not a question of liking or not liking. That is not the experience I had with all 3 of them. Can you hear me? No?
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead,
Yeah,
Rita. Go ahead.
Let me speak in Malayalam also, which is
Yes,
easier for me. No, I'll try to do both because English വരുന്നില്ല. It's not coming now.
It's okay, like
അപ്പം ഞാൻ വിചാരിക്കുമായിരുന്നു എനിക്ക് ഇത് ഇഷ്ടപ്പെട്ടില്ലയോ വെദർ ഐ ലൈക്ക് ഇറ്റ് ഓർ നോട്ട് എന്ന അല്ലാതെ തരത്തിൽ എനിക്ക് എന്തോ തരത്തില് എനിക്ക് ഐ കുഡ് experience the films, I could engage with them, I could connect with them in a very new ways. റിയാസിന്റെ പടം ഞാൻ എത്രയോ തവണ കണ്ടിട്ടുള്ളതാണ്. ഐ ഹാവ് വാച്ച്ഡ് ഇറ്റ് മൾട്ടിപ്പിൾ ടൈംസ്. പക്ഷെ ഇന്ന് ഞാൻ സിനിമ ഒന്ന് നോക്കാൻ വേണ്ടിയിട്ട് എടുത്തപ്പോ വാട്ട് ഹാപ്പൻഡ് വാസ് ഈ ഗ്രേവ് യാർഡ് എന്ന് പറയുന്ന സിനിമയില് ഐ വാസ് മൂവിങ് ദ കഴ്സർ ബിലോ ദ സ്ക്രീൻ. ഞാൻ അങ്ങനെ ക്വിക്ക് ആയിട്ട് കഴ്സർ മൂവ് ചെയ്തപ്പോ വാട്ട് ഹാപ്പൻഡ്, ഈ നസറുദ്ദീൻ ഷാ ഇങ്ങനെ ഫാസ്റ്റ് ആയിട്ട് ശ്വാസം എടുക്കുകയും ഏങ്ങി കരയുന്ന പോലത്തെ ഒരു വിഷ്വൽ എനിക്ക് കിട്ടിയത് കേട്ടോ. എനിക്ക് തോന്നുന്നു ആക്ച്വലി ഐ വാച്ച്ഡ് ഇറ്റ് അഗെയിൻ വൈ ദിസ് ഹാപ്പൻഡ്. അപ്പം ഒരു സോബിങ് ആണ് കണ്ടത്. എനിക്കത് ക്വിക്ക് ആയിട്ട് മൂവ് ചെയ്തതുകൊണ്ട് ആ ബ്രീത്തിങ്ങിനുണ്ടായ ഒരു വ്യത്യാസമായിരുന്നു, ബ്രീത്തിങ്ങിന്റെ കാഴ്ചയിലുള്ള ഒരു വ്യത്യാസമായിരുന്നു എന്ന് തോന്നുന്നു. റിയാസ് അങ്ങനെ ഒന്ന് കണ്ടു നോക്കണം കേട്ടോ. ദാറ്റ് ഈസ് ക്വൈറ്റ് വല്ലാത്തൊരു ഫീലിംഗ് ആയിരുന്നു അത് കണ്ടു. വിപിൻ ആ 2 പടം ഞാൻ കണ്ടില്ല. ആക്ച്വലി ഐ സോ ഓൺലി ദ ഫസ്റ്റ് വൺ. ആ കിറങ്ങിയ പടമാണ് ഞാൻ കണ്ടത്. എനിക്കത് ഭയങ്കര ഇഷ്ടപ്പെട്ടു. മാൻ മെഷീൻ ഇറ്റ്സ് ഓൾറെഡി എ തീം അത് കുറച്ചും കൂടെ നമ്മൾ എക്സ്പ്ലോർ ചെയ്യുകയും കുറെ കൂടെ നമ്മൾ ആലോചിക്കുകയും കുറെ കൂടെ എസ്തെറ്റിക്കലി ഡീൽ ചെയ്യുകയും ചെയ്യേണ്ട ഒരു വിഷയമാണെന്ന് എനിക്ക് എപ്പോഴും തോന്നിയിട്ടുള്ള ഒരു കാര്യമാണ്. വാസ്തവത്തിൽ ഇതിനൊക്കെ ജീവനുണ്ടോ ജീവനില്ല എന്നൊന്നും നമുക്ക് പറയാൻ പോലും പറ്റത്തില്ല എന്ന് തോന്നുന്ന മൊമെന്റ്സ് ഉണ്ട് ലൈഫിൽ. ആർക്കറിയാം. ആൻഡ് യു ഡിഡ് ഇറ്റ് ഇൻ എ വെരി ആ സിനിമയുടെ ഒരു രീതി എനിക്ക് ഇഷ്ടപ്പെട്ടു. ഫ്രം വാട്ട് യു ആർ ടോക്കിംഗ് ഐ അണ്ടർസ്റ്റാൻഡ് ഇറ്റ് വാസ് ടേക്കൺ മെനി ഇയേഴ്സ് ബിഫോർ, റൈറ്റ്? അറ്റ്ലീസ്റ്റ് സെവറൽ ഇയേഴ്സ് ബിഫോർ. ഭയങ്കര രസമുണ്ടായിരുന്നു. അതിലൊരു എയിംലെസ് എയിം എന്നൊക്കെ പറയുന്ന പോലത്തെ എന്തോ ഒരു എനിക്ക് ആ തരത്തിൽ എനിക്ക് അതിനെ ഭയങ്കരമായിട്ട് ഇഷ്ടപ്പെട്ടു. പിന്നെ എവിടെയെങ്കിലും കൊണ്ടൊന്ന് നിർത്താൻ പോകുന്ന ഒരു ഭാവമൊന്നും അല്ല. അല്ലെങ്കിൽ തന്നെ all these films, when I was watching, one thought which came into my mind was this. I think I should share it. നമ്മളൊരു വർക്ക് ചെയ്യുമ്പോൾ എപ്പോഴും നമ്മൾ തീർന്നതിനെ കുറിച്ച് പറയും, തീർക്കുക എന്നുള്ളതിനെ കുറിച്ച് പറയും. ഒരു വർക്ക് നമ്മൾ തീർക്കണം. വാട്ട് ഈസ് ഇറ്റ് അബൌട്ട് finishing? What is it about തീർക്കൽ? അതിനെ കുറിച്ചിട്ട് I thought for a while this forenoon about this thing about finishing. Rather അത് ഏതെങ്കിലും ഒരു പോയിന്റിൽ എനിക്ക് തോന്നുന്നു ഇതൊരു രൂപപരമായിട്ടുള്ള ഒരു ചിന്ത ആയിരിക്കും എന്ന് എനിക്ക് തോന്നുന്നു. കാരണം ഭാവപരമായ ഒരു തീർക്കൽ ഒരിക്കലും ഉണ്ടാവത്തില്ല. രൂപപരമായ ഒരു തീർക്കലും തൽക്കാലത്തേക്കുള്ള ഒരു സ്റ്റോപ്പ് ആയിരിക്കാം അതിന്റെ ഒരു taking a rest from your thinking or your work എന്നുള്ളതാണ്. ആ തീരുക എന്നുള്ളതിനെ കുറിച്ച് ഒത്തിരി ഞാൻ ആലോചിക്കാനിടയായി ഈ സിനിമകൾ കണ്ടപ്പോൾ. അപ്പോൾ ആ അർത്ഥത്തിൽ എനിക്ക് ഭയങ്കരമായിട്ട് ഇഷ്ടപ്പെട്ടു അതിന്റെ ഒരു കിറുക്കവും അതിന്റെ ഒരു മയക്കവും അതിൻ്റെ ഒരു അനിശ്ചിതത്വം എല്ലാം എനിക്ക് ഇഷ്ടപ്പെട്ടു. പിന്നെ ഈ ബന്ധത്തെ ഒരു അന്വേഷിക്കുന്നത് നല്ല ഗംഭീരമായിട്ടുള്ള ഷോർട്സ് ഉണ്ടായിരുന്നു അതിനകത്ത്, ക്ലോസ് ആയിട്ടൊക്കെ ഉള്ള. എനിക്ക് അതെല്ലാം തന്നെ മൊത്തത്തിൽ അത് ഇഷ്ടപ്പെട്ടു. പിന്നെ ഇങ്ങനെ പറയാൻ ഇഷ്ടപ്പെട്ടു ഇഷ്ടപ്പെട്ടില്ല എന്നുള്ളത് ഞാനൊരു സൗകര്യത്തിന് വേണ്ടിയിട്ട് ഉപയോഗിക്കുന്ന വാക്കാണ്. rather I was triggered, I was excited, I was taken by hands to several thoughts, new terrains. So that was a very good experience for me. Ashish in the Padatilu also, what I had a similar experience. That is strange in the sense, you know, this. And the content actually did not, I did not connect to its content at all. I was thinking about, you know, how such process could be, could I redo this in words? അങ്ങനെയൊക്കെ ഞാൻ ആലോചിച്ചു. അതിന്റെ ഒരു മൂവ്മെന്റ്, യെസ്, മേ ബി the movement could be taken. Movement എപ്പോഴും language can carry movement because sound is there. You know, the gate of the language can always, you can work on it, you can negotiate it. But what about the blur? Blur is a word, it's not the exact word, but I'm trying to use a word which comes to my mind now, but I hope you have understood what I mean. If you recall his movie, his film, so how do I capture, I or anyone for that matter, how is it possible to capture this experience of blur into words? Can words do this? Will the memory of words, you know, hold it? And things like that, you know, that way, it excited me a lot, all three movies. That's what. Thank you, all three of you. Vipin, your other film I'll watch tomorrow. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Anita.
Ashish, you want to respond? Say something about it? You want a translation? No.
Yeah, a little translation would be useful. I heard grabs of it about movement and image, but
yeah, two things what you're saying about Vipin's film was about, like while you watch these films, you get a feeling that there is no pressure to finish, you know, you to create a kind of, maybe she was talking about this kind of the narrative pressures to create a beginning, middle, end. And there's a kind of free kind of movement through different kinds of uncertainties, contingencies, and all that. So it doesn't, you know, want to take you anywhere fixedly. Like it just creates a kind of meandering kind of journeys through different kinds of, you know, times, spaces, and all that. That is what really interested in all these works. And about your work, what you were saying is like, how does, you know, as a poet, she's a poet, how does it actually relate? How do you actually recapture it or reimagine it in terms of words? Maybe words can actually capture the movement of it, because language has a particular gate, because it has sound. So it is the gate of language could maybe capture the movement of your images. But what about the blurs? What about the haze? How does it actually, how can language respond to it? How can language actually capture it? That is what she was trying to say. Yeah.
I think language is far more liberating than cinema. This is I'm saying as a filmmaker. I think what linguistic possibility of orality, the ways of how you can move into different terrains through poetic or novelistic or any kind of writing is far more liberating than cinema. I find cinema is, the big difference is that what cinema does is that it produces a certain experiential possibility that has some analogies to our own existence. It is still a representation mode. It is no different. It's not reality in any sense. I think the kind of work I, Vipin, and even Riyas, we're all trying to do in moving images is that fundamentally the problem with the moving image form in India, and this is we have to think historically, is that there is a very strong hegemony of narrative. And this has a lot to do with mainstream cinema, with commercial cinema of all kinds, starting from the early 20th century. that the narrative plays such a profound role that the audience, and any kind of audience, and that's exactly, I think, what Vipin was talking about, the academic who had problems with his film. I think that is where the issue is, that the history of cinema in India, especially in India, is so strongly focused on the narrative that when a film moves away from the narrative form into, as Vipin was talking about, a film which doesn't have a beginning, middle, and end, and this is something not new. Godard talked about the same thing 70 years ago, that you can make cinema as an experiential possibility. But I think what happens in India is that there is so much of narrative fixation that films like the kind of films we make, they get completely marginalized because they don't tend to follow a narrative pattern. We're actually trying to break away. And I think Video Game, which I saw Vipin's film, what about 15 years ago or so, and it's a very big break away from the idea of narrativity. It is about, and as he explains it, it's about ideas. And unfortunately, cinema's ideas has always been about the written text. So I think what we are all trying to do is to push ideas into the moving. And it is not trying to produce an alternative imagination of idea, rather than trying to compete, trying to produce another hegemony. I think we're trying to break away from hegemony. And therefore, I think I really appreciate Anita's comment about the possibility, how do you recreate a blur in the written form? I think the written form can produce far more exciting and beautiful possibilities than what the cinematic form can. And they're two separate forms of being. They cannot be, they're not, again, it's not, as my earlier, it's not about defeat or victory, that they're coterminous, they exist simultaneously. And I think we should not even, I would say that we should think of them as separate being that is helping us understand our existence today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, Ashish, hello.
Yeah.
Ashish, can you hear me?
Yeah, very much.
Yes, yes.
You know, I mentioned that Indian academia, because you see, the problem is that, this everything is related to cultural studies, So I mean, when you go beyond that, what happens is that, when he says that, thoughts might not have come together in this area of academic study, so he rejects it. But the understanding is, for me, in a video work, their placement can trigger off some extraordinary imagination, actually. That is a possibility of folding from one direction of thought to other. And I'm able to, or like you or Riyas or anybody, even some of the film students, and everybody can actually handle it in a, it can be handled by the instant sensation that the world of filmmaking, the craft world of filmmaking creates, actually. So that it's also about prioritizing, there's a self-definition by conceptual separation, and logical consistency that the academic world wants. So that might not, for example, I faced this similar problem when I made my first feature film, and it had no readiness, so it was rejected. I mean, it is not, I don't say that it's because it was not anyway part of a market sense that it was not made in that way. So, but it's like, I feel now it has been made in future tense. At least conceptually and not grammatically, I mean to say. I mean, I want to deal with the technology. Anita was also trying to tell this, I think there is one question that can be asked back to Ashish. I mean, CS can actually translate it. It's about the blur that she was talking, to Ashish. I don't know if Ashish got, hello?
Yeah, he referred to it. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, so for me, that is, that's a world of, there is a world of technological unconscious, actually. So when I'm trying to locate it, there are very many manifestations of idea of desire. For example, what do you do when a body is being transported to the cyberspace? So I'm saying, when you automatically position these kind of queries for yourself, you're doing it for yourself. So you're actually engaging into a very important, deep social assessment and thoughts actually. So, and then slowly it's, hello?
Yeah.
Then it starts to touch your senses, so I think when people get involved in this process of senses, and it creates what can I call it, that kind of a direct sensory experience as a viewer. This is what cinema does actually. So with physical movements, with other, with the sensibility of the sound, everything, there is a sensory experience, and that's the achievement of cinema actually. Now there's of course there's a personal interpretation, but what I'm saying is that when this happens, there are people around in today's context, who can see film viewing more beyond the crafted sort of an aesthetic experience. I think that is now constantly happening actually, because I think the very definition of viewing has also changed actually. Now so within the viewing technologies now, we need to really we need to also look at these possibilities actually, where we are seeing and how we are seeing and all these kind of things actually.
Yeah.
Move
I
to the
think
next question.
Go ahead.
So Bisaji, yeah. So Bisaji, yeah, please.
Am I audible?
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. So firstly, thank you to all the three filmmakers for some very interesting cinematic experience. I think prior to this, I think I had seen Vipin's one film. I had seen Chitra Sutra. So I think all the video games is one film I had heard a lot, but never got a chance to watch. So it was a very interesting experience. With Riyas, obviously, I haven't seen any of his film work, but one work of his which I still remember. I hope I am not. It's not very out of place to comment. I remember in 2015 I had seen one group show. I think in Jahangir maybe there was a group of artists who had collaborated with Sachin Tendulkar, and I still remember Riyas's work there. I don't know. It had an impact on me. So I know so I was very curious to watch Riyas's films, because I thought how, and I really fell in love with Last War. With I think I don't have a direct question. The only question which I have to Bipin, it's not a question, it's just a curiosity, is that about the video game, the structuring of the film. Like I was, it's a very fascinating structure. I really found the structure very interesting. And normally, as a practicing filmmaker, this is always my question: is that how you arrive at this structure? I know always it might not have a definite answer, but maybe if Vipin can talk something about the structuring of the film. And I think for others, I don't have a question, but thank you for giving us a very wonderful, interesting cinematic experience.
Yes, Vipin.
Hello.
Yeah, you can speak. Vipin.
Yeah. Okay. Much of who would ask this? Sabyasaji?
Sabyasaji.
Yeah. Much of what Sabyasaji has asked has been actually dealt with actually at one level in the note that I had sent. I hope he has seen that. Hello, are you hearing me?
Yes.
Yeah. So see, the idea has always been that it's not like as Ashish said that there is a written text or something like that. I mean, you have a certain image. Now, what do you do with that? Of course, there is on one level there is there is an information layer to that image actually. Now, what you do is that you have to really go beyond your feeling and perception and look at something deeper into it. I'm not saying that it is to unravel a kind of a hidden truth in the images, but every image you can see is that has been carried out in a work like video game, it kind of unfolds a certain idea of a fold of subjectivity. Now, this subjectivity could be very divergent. Actually, it's not very distinct. It can be a part of somebody's dream, read books, dreamt things. So it is varied. So what you do is that you cannot easily decipher what it is. So it is a combination of very many things. Now this idea of memory is generated in that image through very many combination, actually, very many sources. Now you will have to really accept, reject, and things at an immediate level. For example, when I work with my editor, that is an earlier stage when we have been collaborating. It's not like you're seeing the same thing. Actually, there is a point at which you see things which he doesn't, and he sees things which I don't. Actually, that is where collaborations happen. Actually, there is a very definite idea of collaboration in these kind of processes. Now, this is also a process of idea of how you kind of layer things. So the structure emanates out of it, because you see the first shot of video game, for example, is actually a statement in some sense, a hand with a, what do you call it, mini DV tape. It came after 10-15 minutes of editing, actually. So there is, so it's not that the first shot is arrived, then you go for the second shot, then the third shot. No, it is not like that. Many of writing, for example, is done in the editing stage, actually. So for example, I write and then you edit, you try to look at the assembly. So there is no preconceived notion, but definitely not that it's a random kind of thing. There is a certain kind of extreme thought process that goes in, but these are integrated. Of course, you have to have a confidence actually to do that, actually, and that confidence comes through this process. Not that it is you cannot actually attain it any other way, actually. But you have to now integrate these kind of thought processes. That is conceptually done, actually. So that's what I'm saying, that there is and it's basically, they are the discourses of things around you, actually. So there is an apparent idea of discourses. So I'm not saying, that's why probably even the academic is perplexed, actually, in a sense that, you are actually playing, you're picking areas and kind of, creating a very different dimension, and a certain movement is arrived at, actually. So I think this whole, that's why I called it concept image, actually. So that creates that structure, actually. So it's basically derived out of conceptual thing, nothing else, actually.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, anybody else?
Can I add a comment to it? Like, hello.
Yeah.
In fact, to respond to Mr. Sabesati's question, I find it a deconstruction of structure is what is your film is about. A deconstruction of already existing narratives or projected narratives in different forms. That is what the structure itself, I feel, in your film.
Yeah, I agree to that, actually. Yep. That sense, it's a self-deconstructive positioning, actually.
Anybody else? Another question, you want to ask something?
Yes.
No. Another question, you want to ask something?
I am saying that, one of the aspects is that, many of these things were, these concepts were also strange, actually. I'm asking, maybe Riyas or Ashish can answer this thing. What do you do when you encounter strangeness, actually? Yeah. It's not, somebody used this word perplexity, but I'm saying that, strangeness, getting attracted to strange things, strange events, actually. And that is where I think the opening happens, Ashish?
I think strangeness is so subjective. What is strange for you might not be strange for somebody else.
Mm.
I think that is important to think of strangeness. But I think the way I try to allow strangeness be strange and do not try to subsume within my own rationality. That has been something that has been my practice. We all come from our own subject position, and all of us right now are mostly middle class, upper class, high caste subject position. And when, for instance, when I from Calcutta as an upper class, middle class individual ended up in working as an activist in the Narmada Valley when I was in my 20s, everything was strange there, and I was shocked by the strangeness. But I think we have to deal with strangeness in our own ways. And it took me nearly about another 7 to 10 years to realize that one way of dealing with strangeness is to make films. And as a matter of fact, my films are all about representing the strangeness that I have not been able to rationalize within my own world. I think, and that's what I try doing. For me, the whole act of making cinema is a way of delving into strangeness of my own being. There's no set way, Vipin. We have
No, just
our own,
wanted your comment.
we have our own ways of being to deal with strangeness. And yeah.
Do I need to also add? I think
Yeah, please.
Ashish said it very well. So see, I'll put this question in a very different way because it has come to me, from many people, that how difficult it is to be an artist. I mean, so how complex. So I actually look at the idea of strangeness as uh, as a subject, the time, or the conversation one is interested in engaging with. So as an artist, I mean, you can always place yourself with your creative instinct in a very strange location. So it's just, I think I like that experience of strangeness, experience of encountering absurdities, experience of engaging with, like, I mean, even if you're dealing with a kind of a certain political subject, something to do with, like, I mean, questioning the system. I actually enjoy that as the risk factor, which gives you tremendous amount of energy to push, little bit further, to present that work in a very complex time. So I like so I constantly feel like, I mean, strangeness with the images produced in contemporary times. Like, I mean, sometimes it is like an image which is produced to appropriate, an image produced to kind of to manipulate. So you have multiple, like, I mean, occurrences of strangeness through different ways. So, but I always actually like that particular site of strangeness as a site for a creative artist to kind of take risk. So how do you make your own art practice more complex by engaging with that site? I mean, so you can move away from strangeness. I mean, you can settle down with a particular way of, like, I mean, producing a work. But in my practice, I've always, tried to kind of encounter that. I mean, I actually like that idea. I mean, it's feeling strange on a constant.
Any other comments or? Then are we running out of time?
I actually,
Yeah.
I actually wanted to, give maybe a, for the previous question about decoding, so Gilly, I mean, I saw Gilly, ask that question. So I just want to tell one incident. I mean, when we were discussing about exhibition making, I mean, I'm not taking the name of that particular project. So somebody told me, like, after visiting that particular exhibition, said, yeah, it was fantastic, but if you have to see that entire project, which is presented, to public for viewing, you need more than 500 hours, because if you calculate the video art, video works or cinema which is presented as part of installation, you actually need more than 500 hours to, if you just calculate the time of those works. So, so I was just thinking, like, I mean, it's also a matter of, like, I mean, how you encounter this, like, I mean, this bombardment of, like, I mean, exhibitions. And in that sense, so, but what you see is that, like Vipin said, I mean, you only see a fraction of it, so, as you visit for a week, when you go for a triennial or a biennial or, like, I mean, major projects. So I just thought, I mean, these are, some of the, administrative crisis, which even a creative person experiences while he shares the work with public with a lot of expectation that my work will be seen. But I always feel that they are not seen much, so we need to create maybe alternate platforms to kind of, to follow that work. So that's why I said, I mean, that 13 minutes, I have a footage of like hours to decipher, that particular thing. So I just thought, I mean, it's also an institutional administrative crisis when we make festivals and other things. I mean, all the film festivals suffer the same syndrome. So I just thought I'll just put it forward.
Yeah. Venkati?
Yeah. Anyone else?
I think, yes. If nobody has any comments, maybe we can.
Yeah. So it is 7:50, right?
Any comments? Any comments, questions?
Can I say something?
Yeah, please. Please do.
Okay. I had a very general question to three filmmakers. Basically, I was thinking Riyas was talking about the strangeness. So when you basically the process of filming or a process of filmmaking, don't you think it's more cinematic than the actual result? Actually, when you try to transcend something which is quite personal, which is quite spiritual for you, but I think most of the time the director's cut is really connected to the director. And I think that nowadays this storytelling, it's a hegemony of this storytelling, pitching forum, and all these things are like almost really turning against the personal vision of the filmmaker. So I was just wondering about this, how do you like spiritually feel this the process, like the filming process and the editing? The Vipin was telling about this, the post-production, the process with the editor. So most of the time this personal feelings almost most probably ends up in the interview or Q&A session and these things. So how do you feel about this? Like if someone can sum up if there is no time.
Yeah.
Vipin, you want to take this?
I mean,
in my case, it's, I mean, I just thought, I mean, I'll give a very short answer. I mean, I'm not a filmmaker, to say. I mean, I'm a painter, so I approach the work in a very different way. And I never do action and cut, while I, work. So most of the time, the cameraman is working with me to kind of document a kind of a large archive, and then we sit on the editing table and make it. Only with Nasir, when we were shooting the work, I think we were following his emotions. So after a point, like after 15 minutes, 16 minutes, the moment he felt little unsettled, that's the time we said, okay, we are cutting it. But we did it 5 times. So I'm saying that for me, I don't behave as a director while I make none of the films are made like that, whether it's a shoot in Pumbahar or in Madurai or in Chennai. So I somehow you even see sometimes you conceive an image aesthetically in your head. So you just follow that. So for me, I don't think I fit into the process of your question. That's I thought I'll just maybe move away from the question and pass it on to Vipin. So
Ashish,
You want me to go first, Vipin?
yeah.
Ananta, filmmaking is there are two kinds of filmmakers. There's one filmmaker who's obsessed with the image he has made. And there's another filmmaker who's obsessed with the making of the image. I belong to the second category, the very act of shooting, and I have a phone with me. Right now, we are constantly making film the moment we pick up a phone and start shooting. And I think that, and there's a shift, when I started making films in the 1990s, we were the first kind of filmmaker. We were obsessed with the final image. What is going to be the final image? And that drove us. And therefore, as Riyas was saying, that's when you had to cut it and you had to start it, because you were shooting in a medium which was so expensive that, especially in India, it was so expensive that you had to be very, very sure of what is going to be the final imagination. But in the last 25 years, it has all changed so dramatically, so radically, that there's no need to even say cut or to start anything. We are constantly, right now, as we are talking, this whole conversation itself is a film. And Ambudan is going to is already recording it, and he'll probably put it on YouTube. We are already there. So I think there's a radical shift in image making in digital world. And therefore, if you have to be filmmaker today, you have to be excited of the act of shooting. I think that is what has happened with me. From 25 years of filmmaking, where you begin as somebody obsessed with the final image, today I'm a filmmaker. We're constantly making film. Everything is an archive. Even I'm recording this. So probably after 20 years, if I'm still alive, there'll be a footage of this event in some film of mine. So I think we are in a different world right now. And I think the question about spirituality is very important. The very act of being is the very act of shooting, is the act that you have to be obsessed with now. What is made is secondary. Vijay,
Well, I think mostly it is answered, Anandan, your question, but I would still say that, cinema did not quickly make a break from this Aristotelian idea of insistence of plot. So as Ashish was earlier saying, narrative, the open market, how it is sold, marketed, consumption of cinema, capital, investment. So this whole quality of immersion, the immersive cinema or the art of cinema where you can immerse is dismissed. So naturally, as your question raises, there is a vacuum actually. So when you say pure cinema, pure art, you're made fun of. It's made fun of actually. So there is a paradox. Look at what is a real crisis. Say, for example, one of my students was asking the other day, I said that there are several crises. One crisis for cinema is that there is no movement in cinema happening. you see the documentary movement from cinema verite, free cinema to, whether it's the French New Wave, it was context sensitive, movements actually created it. So say, for example, when writing about cinema came in, for example, let's say André Bazin in the 1950s, very, very important writer. He hardly lived, what is cinema? In the 50s, he is trying to theorize the artistic advent of the essence of cinema. The essence of cinema, in a sense that for him, cinema's realistic ability to reveal the hidden images in people, and and things without disturbing the natural surroundings from which it is being captured and stuff like that. Deleuze, for example, in the 1980s probably, he articulated a theory of the breakdown between pre-world period and post-world period. Now, what was, say, somebody like Deleuze, he was looking at the work of Griffith, Vertov, Godard, Straub, So actually, not on the history of cinema, Deleuze himself, there is a I mean, like natural history, he's also trying to classify it. So, I mean, for Deleuze, he was, the image is not just what we see. So there is a crisis of the reality and the way images are produced. So they are in constant tussle actually. And of course, as Anandan says, and also as Ashish says, the influx, I mean, the excess of images and information bombardment. Now, this is exactly where some sort of addressals have to be done actually. And I would say, especially in the COVID times, this is the right time for, cinema to actually now regain or look back at its real quality, the artifactual quality of cinema. And the new possibility of cinema is going to evolve or emerge from this crisis actually. That apart that everybody is shooting each other and killing each other, and there's enough of pornography, there is enough of bad cinema and other things. I have tremendous hope, because as a person, I also have, I mean, I like being alive. The adventure of life is the kick actually. So I think the COVID has actually, this situation has actually, of course, there is a slow, non-dramatic sort of disappearance of life happening around us. But this is exactly where I think filmmakers have to now use the apparatus or without, I mean, whatever, through their medium, look at the idea of what is cinematic. Anandan, does it makes any sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to say I watched the Riyas film also quite long ago. The Nasruddin Shah film, watched it quite long ago. But my question was like the experience, like like when you talk about the process, I feel like all the three filmmakers, when they talk about the process, and if you had like these days, if you have another person to film your process, I feel like when I was listening to all this, listening to the background stories of like Riyas was talking about Bombay, and both of you are talking about Kolkata. So there is already a connection. Like there are a lot of things are connecting for me when these three filmmakers were talking about it. So that's what I was thinking. Like the personal experience always, it's just personal, no? That's what I want. That's what I was thinking.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Amudan, we can wind up. Okay, if there are no more questions, I think it's already 2 o'clock. So I think thank Ashish, Riyas, and Vipin for being part of this program, giving it films, and also to spend time with us to answer the questions and talk about your films and art. Thank you so much. And I thank all the participants here who
Thank
the
you.
activity took part in it. Thank you, Amudan. Over to Amudan.
Thank you very
and
much.
also tomorrow we have this last session of this interactive program. And tomorrow we have Sumedra Rajendran, Radha Gomati, and Urli Chirot talking to us. So please be here at 6 o'clock tomorrow. Over to Amudan.
Thank you very much, Venkati. Thank you, filmmakers. It's nice to kind of a master class listening to three of you to do. So tomorrow we'll be joining the 3 more filmmakers, and the films will be shown till 12 a.m. 2nd November. So please inform others also to whom you are not watched the film. Thank you very much for participating. Thank you, Venkati, once again for curating this festival. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night. Good night.
Okay, Amudan. So see you tomorrow.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir. Thank you, sir. Okay, see you soon. Bye.